Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Hey Amud Aleph, 25a of Maseches Kiddushin. We are on the second line of the page. The Gemara says, the end of the second line, Sabi de Nizumya lo asu lepirkei de Rav Chisda. The elders of this place called Nizumya, they didn't show up to Rav Chisda's shiur, his class, his lecture, as they were supposed to apparently. So Rav Chisda was not happy about that. Amar le'le Rav Hamnuna, he said to Rav Hamnuna, who was his student, Zil tzaninhu, go and tzaninhu. Rashi tells us tzaninhu means tell them to stay home. Like ostracizing them, excommunicating them maybe. He says tell them they need to stay in their houses. So Rav Hamnuna goes, and Amar lehu, and he said to them, my time lo asa rabbanan lepirka. He said, rabbis, students, why didn't you come to the lecture of Rav Chisda? Amrulei, they said to him, Amai nesi, why would we come? Diba'inon mine milsa v'lo pashat lani. Because we ask him things and he doesn't answer it. So what's the point? He doesn't have the answers to our questions. So, this is what they're saying this about Rav Chisda. So Rav Hamnuna responds, Amar lahu, he said to them, Mi ba'isu minai midi v'lo pashit naluchu. Have you ever asked me anything and I didn't know the answer? And certainly Rav Chisda would know the answer. So what are you like? He tested them, ask away. So they said, okay, we'll test you, we'll ask you a question. Bo minei, they asked him the following question. So last week we were discussing, the last couple weeks, the halachos relating to an Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave, that if a external organ, extremity is ruined, is injured permanently, so then that sets the slave free. So the Torah talks about an eye or a tooth, and the Rabbanan through Joshua, through interpreting the verses, they extend it to all extremities, fingers, etc. That we're actually going to have a list shortly that would not regenerate when cut off. So they asked him the following. Ba'u minei, they asked him, Eved shesarso rabo bebeitzim ahu. What is the halacha if the master castrates the servant, the slave, bebeitzim? Beitzim literally are like eggs, but it's the term used to refer to the body part, the testicles. So what if the master were to castrate the slave's testicles? Would the halacha be that the slave goes free as a result? What's the question? So the question was, how do we relate to that part of the body? Kinmum shebegalui dami olo. Is that considered an external? Because only external organs set him free. So is that considered external or not? Rashi explains the question is because on the one hand, the testicles are in this sack of skin, so they're visible. The shape is visible, but also they're contained. So how do we look at that? So that was the question, and they asked it to Rav Hamnuna, and the Gemara says lo hava biyadeh. He didn't have the answer. He wasn't sure. So amru lo. So they said to Rav Hamnuna, Ma shimcha? Ma shemach? What's your name? By the way, messenger of Rav Chisda, what's your name? Amru lahu. He said to them, Hamnuna. My name is Hamnuna. Amrulei, they said to him, Lav Hamnuna ela Karnuna. They said, nah, your name's not Hamnuna, you're Karnuna. Ha ha. So what were they saying? So Rashi explains, actually Rashi and Tosfos each offer their own interpretation. Rashi says, they were saying, you're like a Yoshev Kronos. You're someone who sits on the street corners. You're not a Talmid Chacham. You're a Karnuna from the root Karen, the corners. You sit around. You obviously don't know anything. So you're just you're not a Talmid Chacham. You're not a learned person, you're a Yoshev Kranos, you're somebody who sits on street corners. That's how Rashi interprets it. Tosfos says, in the name of Rabbeinu Chananel, that you think you are Hamnuna, like Chamnuna. Nuna apparently is a kind of fish. You think you're a hot fish? You're Karnuna, you're a cold fish. And apparently that was an insult to him. So this is the Sabid and the Zunya, obviously they had sharp tongues and attitude, and they say, oh, Hamnuna, you can't answer our questions, you are a Karnuna. Asala kamed Rav Chisda. So Rav Hamnuna went back to Rav Chisda. Amar le, and he told him what happened. So Amar le, Rav Chisda responded, Masnisa bo minach. What they were asking you is really something that we learn in a brisa. You should have known the answer. And again, they asked, what is the status of a man's beitzim, testicles, if the master would castrate them? Would that be considered grounds for freeing the slave or not? Is it external or not? So he says it's a brisa. Did Tanakh, because we learned in a Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Esrim ba'arba rashe evarim sheba adam kulam eng metamim mishum michya. They're the 24 extremity limbs on a person's body. A person cannot become tameh because of michya. So what's michya? Michya is so we have a parsha of negayim, of certain plague or blemishes like tzaras that a person can grow on their skin, which makes them tameh. So one of them is that if there is such a problem on the skin, and within it is a michya, is like a healthy portion of flesh, then that automatically makes the person tameh, if that is there. However, it's only if the Kohen who declares the person tameh, that's how it works. He checks the nega, he checks the blemish, and if he sees that it's something tameh, he declares him tameh. He has to be able to see the entire blemish at the same time. Therefore, if it's on the part of the body that is an extremity, and it therefore has like a second side to it, then he cannot become tameh. So the Mishnah says, this is a Mishnah in Mishnayos Negayim, the Mishnah says that if a person has a nega, has some sort of skin blemish, and there's a michya, and there's that healthy space, that healthy flesh inside the nega. So if it's on one of the rashay ivarim, the extremity limbs, then it does not make the person tameh. So what are examples? The Mishnah says, ve'eloheim, these are the extremities that this is true for. Rashay etzbaos, the tops of the fingers, so that's, I guess, 10. Both yadayim v'raglayim, both for the hands and the feet, so that's the 20. We said there's 24 altogether, so that's 20. V'rashay oznayim, the ears, that's 22. V'rosh hachotim, and the nose. V'rosh hagaviyah, and the end of a man's reproductive organ, his penis. That would also be, again, we're talking about negayim right now, we're talking about blemishes that would make a person tameh. So if they had such a blemish on their skin, on any of these parts of the body, any of these extremities, then they could not become tameh, because you can't see the whole thing at once, because it's at the edge and you wouldn't be able to see the whole thing at once. The Mishnah continues, it says, those are 24 that are relevant for a man. For a woman, there would actually be 25, because it says, V'rashe dadim shebe isha. So for a woman, there's the nipples on her breasts also this would apply for. And so for her, it's -1, but +2, so 25. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af shebe ish. Rabbi Yehuda says even for the nipples on a man, the same is true. So that's the Mishnah. Fine. So that's a Mishnah that actually has to do with negayim, with the laws of how you check the nega, a skin blemish, to see if the person is tameh. But there's a brisa on that, v'tani Allah, and we're learning a brisa about that. Bikulam eved yotze bohem l'cheiros. For all of these things, the eved goes free, the slave goes free. If any of these things is injured, any of these extremities. So those are the 24 or 25 or I guess possibly even 26 for a man if you count also his nipples. So then that's those are the areas that if they would be injured permanently by the master, the slave would go free. Rabbi Omer, now the brisa continues, and it says that Rabbi says af hasirus. Rabbi says that when it comes to an eved, when it comes to a slave, a Canaanite slave going free, sirus, castration also sets him free. Now it doesn't say castration of what, so we'll get to that in a second, but he says castration also sets him free. Ben Azai Omer af halashon, and Ben Azai says also the tongue. If the tongue is cut off, also the slave goes free. So, okay, so far we have this brisa, and we know these elders of Nizunya had asked Rav Hamnuna, what is the story, what is the halacha if a master castrates the slave's testicles? He didn't know the answer. Does that set the slave free or not? When he went back to Rav Chisda said it's a brisa. Rav Chisda then went and quoted him a Mishnah about Nigaim that said there's 24 Nigaim, 24 extremities on the body that if one sees a nega there, a blemish, and specifically I think this is relevant for Michya, where there's a healthy piece of flesh there, potentially. If you can't see the whole nega, you can't make the person tameh. So, and then we had a brisa that said, and this is all those Rashi Ivarim, that list is true for freeing a slave as well. Those are the same extremities that set the slave free. And then Rebbe said that also sears, castration, sets him free, and Berazai said also cutting off the tongue. So the Gemara now says, so we don't have our proof yet. The Gemara has to still develop the proof to answer the question of the elders of Nizunya. So Amar Mar, so the master said, we said in this brisa, Rabbi Omer Afasirus. Rabbi said also castration. So the Gemara asks, the Gemara says, Sirus Demai, what was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi talking about? Castration of what? Ilema Sirus de Gid, if he was talking about castrating the actual organ, the actual reproductive organ, so then Hainu Gavia, that was already mentioned in the Mishnah on the list. That was part of the list. That was true even for Negayim, even for not just for setting slaves free. That was part of the original list of 24. So Ella Lav Sirus de Beitzin. So isn't it talking about castrating the Beitzin, the testicles? And therefore, says Rav Chisda, you see that, at least according to Rabbi, according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, yes indeed, if the master were to cut off the slave's beitzim, that would indeed set the slave free. That's what Rav Chisda said to Rav Hamnuna, you should have been able to answer the elders of Nizunya. Now the Gemara continues to investigate this brisa, and it says that Rabbi Omer Afasirus. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, even castration. So the Gemara and then Berazai said, even the cutting off the tongue. So the Gemara wants to know, what does Rabbi hold about cutting off the tongue? Rabbi Lashon Lo, Rabbi would hold, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi doesn't agree to Berazai. He would hold that cutting off the tongue would not set the slave free. Viraminu, but we have a contradiction from a brisa. The brisa says, Aremisha haya mazeh. So now we move to a different topic in the Torah, the topic of a tameh mace. If a person became tameh, impure, by coming in contact or under the same roof of a dead body, so they are tameh mace. They are tameh from the dead body, and part of the purification process is they need to be sprinkled with water that has been mixed with the ashes of the para aduma, so of the red heifer. So So the Gemara quotes a brisa that talks about the sprinkling and where you can do the sprinkling, and the halacha is that the sprinkling of the ashes of the water onto the person who needs purification has to be on the outside of the person's body. It can't be internally. They can't drink the water or something necessarily. Although we'll see that may not be so simple. So the Gemara says, the Brisa says, "Arimisha yamazeh." If somebody was sprinkling this water onto a person to purify them, v'nitzeh haza al piv, and they ended up sprinkling onto his mouth, Rabbi Omer Hiza, Rabbi Hanasi says that works. On his mouth, or in his mouth, it's not so clear, it sounds like it says on his mouth, that works. The Chachamim Omrim lo hiz, and the Chachamim say it does not work. He has not been sprinkled, he's not purified. So the Gemara says, "My lav al lashono." Don't we mean here? What do we mean on his mouth? Don't we mean on his tongue? And that would create a problem for us, because then it would come out that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is saying that you can sprinkle on his tongue, which means that he's so holding that the tongue is considered external. And if the tongue is considered external, then how come when it comes to the slave, he seemingly held that cutting off the tongue does not set the slave free? That's something external. Right? The tongue obviously is a good question, because it's you see it sometimes, but it's inside the mouth. So that's what we're not sure about here. But as they say, cutting off the tongue is cause for freeing the slave. It's considered external. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi seemed to imply that he held that it's not. But now he's saying that if you sprinkle on the mouth, it works. And what do we mean by on the mouth? Don't we mean on the tongue? So we see that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that on the tongue is considered external. So the Gemara says, "Oh, al sefasav." No, we're talking about on the lips, not on the tongue. On the lips, and they have no proof about the tongue. So the Gemara says, "Al sefasav pshita." What do you mean on the lips? That's obvious. It's external. What's not external about the lips? Why would we need to even say that if you sprinkle on the lips, it works? So the Gemara says, "Ma'od detema," because what would I have said? Zimnin dechalim sfase. That since sometimes a person closes their mouth very tight and tucks in their lips, so maybe since it's, I guess, possible and at times the lips are hidden, maybe they are not considered external, rather internal, and you could not sprinkle on them. Kamash Malan, that's where it's coming to teach me that according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, according to Rabbi, if you sprinkle on the lips, it works, and according to the Chachamim, it doesn't work. Right, it's interesting. The Gemara seemingly could have just answered, right, if we asked Pshita, it's obvious. Well, if it's obvious that it works, then the Chiddush could have been in the Rabbanim who say it doesn't work. But the Gemara said a different answer. It said that it went and explained why it's actually novel that it does work according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. V'hatanya, but the Gemara asks, but that can't be because we have a brayso that says al lishono. We have another brayso that's actually explicit that what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and the Rabbanim are arguing about is the tongue. So forget about this whole lips thing. We actually have an explicit brayso that says it's the tongue. So we're back to our question that we see that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi considers the tongue to be external. Ve'otanya, and furthermore we have another brayso. The brayso says, "V'shenitel rov halashon." This brayso is talking about another area of the Torah, a bechar. The firstborn animal is supposed to be brought as a karban, but as an offering. But there are certain mumim, certain blemishes that make it pasul. So with regards to that, what kind of blemish makes it invalid for a karban? So it says, "V'shenitel rov halashon," if most of its tongue has been removed. Rabbi Omer, so that's the first opinion. And Rabbi Omer, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is rov hamadaber shavel lishono. that you don't need the majority of the tongue, but just the majority of the part of the tongue that's used to speak. Now it's a cow, so it's not speaking, but the point is the front part of the tongue, the majority of that, the part that moves around, that's not stuck to the back of the mouth, the majority of that. The first opinion says the majority of the whole tongue. The tongue is quite large, so the majority is a large piece. But Rebbe says, no, you don't need, to make it invalid, you just need the majority of the front of the tongue, the movable part of the tongue. But what we see, now a blemish for a carbon is always external, can't be internal. So again, we see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi considers the tongue to be something external. So rather, Rabbi Omer, so we have this problem. Our problem is that the original Brisa had said that Rabbi Omer Afasirus, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says even sears, even castration sets the slave free. Ben Azai said even cutting off the tongue. And it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi holds that cutting off the tongue doesn't set him free. But why not? We see two examples now where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi holds that the tongue is considered external, and therefore cutting it off should set the slave free. So says the Gemara, you're right. Ela Rabbi Omer Sirus Velomi Bayi Lashon. So rather we have to understand that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is teaching us Sirus, castration, and there's no question that the tongue also would set the slave free. And Ben Azai Amar Lashon. Ben Azai says only the tongue. Aval Sirus la, but not Sirus, not castration. But the language that Ben Azai used was af halashon, even the tongue. Now that sounds like he agrees to Rebbe. So the Gemara says, Umay af, what do we mean by even? Akamaisa. He was going back on the original list. We have an original list of 24 things. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said even castrating, the baits in the testicles, would set the slave free. And we're saying now, and certainly the tongue. And Ben Azai says even the tongue. Now his even wasn't going on the castration because he doesn't hold of that. It was going back on the 24 also. There are 24 things that set the slave free, and Ben Azai says an even cutting off the tongue, another one, a 25th. So the Gemara says, Ihachi, if that's the case, Nikadma de Ben Azai Bereisha. We should have put Ben Azai earlier in the Mishnah. Why did we make the Mishnah in this order? It's very strange. The Mishnah goes, there's 24 things, maybe 20, different ones for a woman, maybe additional ones for man. Fine. And that's actually the Mishnah about Negayim. Then there's a Brisa that says that these things are all relevant for setting a slave free also. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, and even castration, and also, I don't even have to tell you cutting off the tongue. And Ben Azai says, and even cutting off the tongue. That's very awkward. We should have done it the other way. We should have said, first Ben Azai. Ben Azai says, even cutting off the tongue. And then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, and even serious, even castration. And he would be going, his even would be going back on everything. Those 24 things, even the tongue, and even castration. That would have been a much better way to write the Brisa. So the Gemara explains that's true. But Tana Shama L'Rebbe V'Kava. This Tana, the author of this Brisa, he had heard first the opinion of Rebbe, and he established it, and he was teaching it, and that's how people started to learn it. They would learn the Brisa, and they would repeat it, and they would say, we have a Mishnah Negayim that lists 24 things, 24 parts of the body where you can't have this certain type of tumah, where this type of nega, this type of blemish wouldn't make a person tummy. And we have a Brisa, and now we're going to learn that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, we have a Brisa that says all these body parts also apply to freeing a slave. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, even castration and cutting off the tongue. And that's what they were learning. They hadn't heard of Ben Azai's opinion yet. And they were learning that. V'shama de Ben Azai, and after that they heard the opinion of Ben Azai. V'tani, and then they started learning that and put it afterwards. Mishnah lo zazam imkoma, but the original formulation of the Mishnah, they didn't want to move. They didn't want to mess with it, what they had already started to memorize and learn it that way. They left it the way that it had originally been composed. So it's true, in the end, it's stylistically a little bit awkward, but they left it that way because that's how it was known to them, that's how they knew how to say it. They were memorizing everything, and they didn't want to mix themselves up by, inserting a new piece into the middle of the brisa, so they put it at the end. Okay. Omar Ula. Ula says, Hakol modim b'lashon le'inyan tuma, digalayhu eitzel hasheretz. Everybody agrees that when it comes to a tongue, and when it comes to the laws of tuma, of spiritual impurity, that it's considered external when it comes to a sheretz. A sheretz is a creepy crawly, certain creatures that there's 8 specific shratzim, animals mentioned in the Torah that make a person tamei if you touch them, and it's only if you touch the outside of it. But the Brisa Ula says everybody agrees that the tongue is considered outside with regards to the halachos of the tuma, of the impurity of a sheretz. My taima, what's the reason? The reason is because the pasuk says Asher yiga bo amar Rachmana. The Torah says with regards to the sheretz that anybody who actually, I think this pasuk is not actually with regards to the sheretz. It's with regards to touching a zav, a man who became pure from certain types of emissions, impure, and it says there Asher yigabo, the one who touches him. Actually, something that he touches. If the zav touches, v'hainami bar negiyahu, and the tongue is something that you can touch with. The tongue is something that you can touch with, and therefore it's included in that. Anything that he touches, that it touches, and I guess the same is true for the sheretz. Anything that the sheretz touches, also is tamei, and a person and an animal touch with their tongue. So that would be included in the laws of what they can make tamei. So that everybody agrees to. Tevila, when it comes to immersing in a mikvah, kitamon dami, everybody agrees that the tongue is considered something hidden. You don't have to immerse the inside of your body. You have to immerse the entire outside of your body to become pure. Whether a man becoming pure, whether a woman becoming pure, they have to immerse the entire body. So do they have to stick out their tongue? So Ula says no. Everybody agrees that you do not have to stick out your tongue. It's considered like the inside of your body. My taima. What's the reason? Virachatz bisaro b'mayim amar Rachmana. Because the Torah says you should immerse your flesh in water. This is in the context of a zav, again, a man who became impure from certain types of emissions. But we take these halachos and apply them to immersion in general. So it says he should immerse his flesh in the water. Ma bisaro me'avrai, afkol me'avrai. Just like it mentions flesh, you have to immerse your flesh in the water. So just like flesh is external, so too only the things that are external does one have to immerse, but one does not have to immerse his or her tongue. Meaning it's teaching you don't have to open up your mouth, only that which is external. Now, where is there a machlokus? Where is there a dispute? In one area, which is what we mentioned before, which is when it comes to haza'ah. When it comes to sprinkling the meichatas, the water that has the ashes of the paradum, of the rag heifer mixed in, which is used to purify somebody who became tamei meis, became defiled, impure from contact with the dead body. So there the question is, can you sprinkle on the tongue or only on the external parts of the bodies? And we mentioned that Rabbi held that you could, that if you do it on the tongue it works, and the Chachamim held that if you do it on the tongue it doesn't work. Rabbi medami lo l'tuma. Rabbi compares the tongue in this case to tuma, to somebody who's making something else tamei. So like a sheretz can make something tamei by touching it with his tongue. Someone tamei, I guess. A person who is tamei can make someone else tamei by touching them with their tongue. And Rabbi compares this also, the halachos of where the water that's being sprinkled for the tamei mace, for the person who's impure, if it could be sprinkled on his tongue, Rebbe says it could. He compares it to tumah. V'Rabbanan medamu lo l'tvila. But the Rabbanan compare it to immersion. And just like we said, for immersion, the tongue is considered interior, and you don't have to dip your tongue in the mikvah. So too, with regards to purifying a person who's tamei mace with the sprinkling these waters, the tongue is considered interior, and you can't purify them by getting it on their tongue. And the Gemara says that they're actually arguing in interpreting the same verse. The verse says, in the context of a tamei mace, of somebody who became impure from a dead body, and it talks about sprinkling the special water on them, it says, V'yizah tahor ala tamei v'gomer. It says that a pure person should sprinkle the waters onto the person who's impure, the gomer, and so on. Actually, what the so on is going to be important, which is that it says, V'yizah tahor ala tamei, and the pure person should sprinkle onto the impure person, Bayom hashlishi u'bayom hashvi, on the third day of their purification and on the seventh day. V'chita'o, and he purifies him, he sprinkles on him, and that's going to be the key word. It's kind of this hard word to translate exactly, but it means he purifies him, or he sprinkles him, Bayom hashvi'i, on the seventh day, V'chibes bigadav, and he has to wash his clothes, V'rachatz b'mayim, and he has to immerse in the water, V'tahir ba'arv, and then he's pure in the evening. So we have this word in the middle of V'chita'o, and he will be purified. And the question is, what is that word connected to? The beginning of the pasuk or the end of the pasuk? So Rebbe holds V'yizah tahor ala tamei, that it says you should sprinkle, a pure person should sprinkle on the impure person Bayom hashlishi, on the third day, u'bayom hashvi, on the seventh day, v'chita'o, and purify him. And he's connecting the word v'chita'o and purify him to the earlier part of the pasuk, which talked about the person's tamei. It called him a tamei. Ala tamei, he is tamei, right? So it called him a tamei, and v'chita'o connects to that, and says, Rabbi, we learned that the process of v'chita'o, the process of sprinkling, is similar to the person who's tamei. That just like someone who's tamei, their tongue can be metame, can make something else impure. So too, v'chita'o, when you purify him with the waters, we look at the tongue in the same way. We treat it like a tamei, meaning the tongue is considered external. Rabbanan Savri, and the Rabbanan hold that you read the v'chita'o connected to the end of the pasuk. It says v'chita'o bayom hashvi, that he'll be purified on the seventh day. V'chibes bigadav, and he should wash his clothes. V'rachatz b'mayim, and he should immerse in the water. And just like when you immerse in the water, the tongue is considered internal, so too v'chita'o, in the purification process, the tongue is considered internal. And therefore you can't sprinkle onto the tongue. That's how the Rabbanan interpret. Asks the Gemara, V'Rabbanan nami nidmaya l'tumah. Let the Rabbanan say like Rebbe, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Why don't they compare it to tumah, like the earlier part of the pasuk? Because they say tahara mitara havalei lamelach. They say no, it's logical. You want to learn purifying from purifying. We're talking about purifying the person who's tamei. We're talking about sprinkling the water on them. So what do you want to compare it to? Do you want to compare it to how a sheretz, or a person who's tamei, is metame, defile something else? Or do you compare it to the purification process of going into a mikvah? It makes more sense if we're talking about a purification process that we should compare it to the purification process of going into the mikvah. So the Rabbanan say that just like when you go into a mikvah, the tongue is considered internal and does not need to be immersed, doesn't need to get wet, can keep it in their mouth when they go dunk their head underwater. So too, when it comes to sprinkling the special water to make someone pure, earlier in the purification process, at least for when a person's tamei mace, tamei from a dead body, so too there, the tongue is considered internal, and you can't sprinkle on that part of the body. So that's a good point. The Gemara says, V'Rebbe, so now we turn back to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and we say to him, Nidmaya l'tvila. Why don't you compare it to tvila? Purification. Doesn't it make more sense to compare it to immersion? So he says, it would be very nice, but you can't read the pasuk that way. V'chibes bigadav hifsik ha'inyan. The words that you should wash his clothes interrupts. So you have in the pasuk that it says v'chita'o, and he'll be purified by Yom HaShvi on the seventh day. V'chibes bigadav, and he should wash his clothes v'rachatz b'mayim, and immerse in the water. So if you want to connect v'rachatz b'mayim back to the word v'chita'o, you can't have the washing the clothes in the middle. Clearly, says Rabbi, they're not related. The v'chita'o is not connected to the immersion, and the process of purifying this person who's tamei meis, v'chita'o, is to be compared to earlier in the pasuk of when it declares him as a tamei, that just like as a tamei, a person defiles, makes things, is mitame, things with his tongue, he could if he touches them, so too, and the tongue is considered external, so too with regards to purifying him, the tongue is external, and you can sprinkle the water on the tongue. Says the Gemara, V'savar Rabbi le'inyan tvila k'tamon dami. Ula had said that everybody agrees that when it comes to immersing in a mikvah, everybody agrees the tongue is internal and you don't have to stick out your tongue. So the Gemara asks, is that true? Even Rabbi Yehuda Nasi agrees to that. V'ha'amar Ravin. But Ravin said, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. They said in the name of Rav Ada, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, Maise b'shivcha shel beis Rabbi. There was a story of a maid servant from the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, shetavla, that she went to be tovalis, probably to complete her conversion in this case. Ve'alsa, and she came out. V'nimtza etzem bein shina, and there was a bone stuck in her teeth. V'tricha Rabbi tvila acharis, and Rabbi required her to go back. So the question is why? I understand that a chatzitza, if there's an interruption on the skin, on the external skin, which you have to immerse, so then that could be a problem because that part of the body didn't get immersed in the water. It didn't come in contact with the water. But the teeth, there's something stuck in the teeth, so it's blocking part of the tooth. But are the teeth being immersed? So it sounds like Rabbi says yes. It sounds like Rabbi holds that you have to, scoop the water into your mouth. And therefore he said that since she had a bone in her teeth, her tevilah didn't count. And just like Rabbi holds that when it comes to the teeth, he seems to insist that the teeth get wet, so it should follow the same with the tongue. What's the difference? So Rabbi seems to hold that you do have to immerse your tongue in the mikvah. So the Gemara says, no, that's not true. Nihi de bias mayim lo ba'inan, makom haroi lavo bo mayim ba'inan. No, it's true. You don't need the water to enter the mouth, even according to Rabbi. What you do need is that it should be ra'oi lavo b'mayim. It should be fit. It can't have a chatzitza. It can't have an interruption, but you don't actually have to immerse it in water. And it says that it's similar to the concept of Kiddur Rabbi Zera, like Rabbi Zera taught. De Amar Rabbi Zera says, Kol haroyu lebila ein bila ma'akaves bo, v'she'eno royu lebila bila ma'akaves bo. So Rabbi Zera lays down a law when he's saying this in the context of the carbon mincha. Carbon mincha was a flour offering mixed with oil, and the halacha is that the bowl that you mix the oil and the flour is not allowed to have more than 60 isaron of flour. That's a measurement of flour. It can't have more than 60. Why? So the reason is because you're supposed to mix the flour with the oil, and if you're supposed to mix the flour with the oil. Now, if the halacha is if you don't mix the flour with the oil, so it's still a good carbon if you didn't mix it. However, that's only true if there was 60 isaron or less, because then at least it's ra'oi labila, at least it's mixable. But if there was more than 60 isaron of flour in that bowl, you can't mix it. It's too much to mix, and therefore the mincha would not be good. And the rule that Rabbi Zera teaches, it's a somewhat famous rule, is if it's ra'oi labila, ein bila ma'akaves. As long as it's possible to do the bila, it's possible to mix it, then the mixing won't be ma'akev. It won't prevent the carbon from going. You're supposed to mix it, but if you don't, the carbon's still good. But if it wasn't even possible to mix it properly, so then the carbon's no good if you don't mix it. I mean, you didn't mix it because you couldn't mix it properly. But then, actually, I'm not sure. It could be that if you would mix it, it would be good. But certainly, if you don't mix it at that point, it's not good because it's not ra'ei labila. It's not fit for mixing. So that's the rule sometimes, that you don't actually have to do it, but it has to be fit to be done. So the Gemara is saying that that's the same thing when it comes to immersion in a mikvah. You don't have to immerse your teeth or your tongue, but it has to be fit for that. Meaning there still can't be a chatzitza, something interrupting on the tongue. And that's why, in the case where this woman had a bone in her teeth, and it was blocking water from being able to access her teeth, even though water wasn't actually going to access her teeth. She would keep her mouth closed in the mikvah, but still, that renders the tevilah no good, the immersion no good, because now water is not able to access the teeth. The Gemara now says, a few more lines here, we turn to Chaf Hei Amud Beis, 25b, Kitanai. This whole original question, going back to the original question about the beitzim, the castration of beitzim, if that is, of the testicles, if that's enough to if that would set the slave free or not. So Rav Chisda said, yeah, it's a brisa. The Gemara says it's actually a machlokes, a dispute between Tanaim. The pasuk says, with regards to the mumen, different blemishes that render a kohen invalid from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. So it says 4 things relating to his private organs. It says that if he is ma'uch v'kasus v'natuk v'charus. Ma'uch is they dissolve down. Kasus is they were crushed. Natuk and karus are different types of being cut off, different degrees of karaf. Natuk is they're still somewhat attached, but they're and karus is more separated, but it's also still attached a little bit. So now, are we talking about? Is this pasuk talking about beitzim, testicles, or his actual reproductive organ? So the Gemara has the Brisa has different opinions. So kulan bebeitzim. The first opinion says it's all. This whole pasuk is talking about the testicles. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara says bebeitzim v'lo begid. What? Only if these accidents happen to the beitzim, to the testicles, that renders him invalid. But if it would happen to the gid itself, to the reproductive organ itself, it wouldn't render him invalid. That doesn't make sense. Certainly it should be true if it's on his organ itself. Elakulan af bebeitzim. No, what we mean is that Rabbi Yehuda, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says it's all true even for beitzim, even for the testicles, but certainly for the reproductive organ itself, for the gid. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says kulan begid. They're only true by the gid, but not by the testicles. If these things happen to the testicles, it's not considered a blemish. He could still serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yossi says ma'uch v'kasus af bebeitzim. The first 2 are true even for the testicles, crushed or dissolved. That's more visible, more recognizable. It's more external, I guess, and therefore it's considered a blemish that you can't serve. Natuk v'karus. But if it's just cut and hanging, begid in bebeitzim lo, that would render him invalid if it was on his reproductive organ itself, but not on the testicles. So we have here, basically, this is in the context of what's considered a blemish for a Kohen to serve, but the qualifications are the same. It's only true for something that is external. So our question, only an external blemish would render him invalid, and our question with regards to whether the slave is set free also has to do with whether it's external or not. So, according to the first opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, the beitzim, the testicles, are considered external. According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, they are not, and the slave will not go free. According to Rabbi Yossi, it sounds like it would depend what occurred to them. If they were crushed, then yes, that's considered that would be visible, recognizable, and would set the slave free. If they were just cut but are still hanging, so then maybe it might depend to what degree. But if they still appear to be still attached, that would not set the slave free. Okay, we start a new Mishnah next time, Mirz Hashem.